It's April the 22nd, 2025. This is Five Way to Show About Worcester. How you doing?
Fantastic, Mike. How are you?
Good. I'm Mike Benedetti. This is Brendan Milliken.
How's it going? It's been a long time, man.
It's been a little while.
Yeah.
You know, it's good to take a break.
How long has it been?
It's been.
How was your COVID?
We have done a show post COVID.
Well, I had COVID. I don't really remember much.
Oh, my COVIDs have been. I don't know, my COVIDs have been up and down, up and down. I want to ask you something.
All right.
I wrote this down. So as a result of a number of bubbles over the last 150 years, we have all around us the perfect physical setup for an early 20th century New England manufacturing city here at the headwaters of the Blackstone River.
I agree.
And it's been a couple of generations since what the economy wanted the people in the city to do was be a manufacturing city.
Sure.
And especially now with the trends of all the trends that are post-COVID trends, that are mid-AI boom trends, all of these seem to point it away still from mid-20th century American manufacturing city.
Back when we were on the cover of National Geographic, the future of American cities.
In some ways probably true. Maybe not in the positive ways they thought. What's the outlook for Worcester now? Because we had this renaissance, this weird boom that was cut off very strongly by the COVID thing.
Yes.
And again, has not, and post-COVID, we're just that's not happening anymore.
The thing that, and I'm going to do my best to try and not be snarky here, right? But the thing that I think Worcester has going for it, we had a boom. We called, what was it, a renaissance? Is that what we were doing in Worcester?
We definitely.
Renaissancing?
We can do the research. I want to credit. We on this show were the first to mention a Worcester vegetarian renaissance.
Vegetarian renaissance.
Which I'm pretty sure is the first any kind of renaissance.
Any renaissance we've had since the Renaissance.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's interesting is one of the things that Worcester isn't always great about doing is looking outside its borders and recognizing that it's not actually special. Like you hear this a lot in council talk, right? Like Worcester's different. It's really not.
It's definitely not.
And what we saw during our building boom and our economic boom over that decade that you mentioned, maybe even a little bit longer, was kind of happening in every mid-tier city in the country because most places had run out of places to build. Not as many places were as inexpensive to build and buy as places like Worcester. So in a weird way, we're a little bit behind the curve, right? Boston had a similar boom roughly 10 years earlier. The seaport grew out of the ocean and became this incredibly densely packed neighborhood. Things moved west as they became more affordable and more accessible. So I don't think we were special in that regard. But where we are kind of special is that we are always kind of a little bit behind the curve. Like you mentioned manufacturing, right? There are going to be entire swaths of our country that are probably taken offline from an economic perspective because of AGI, right? We know now that the Biden administration was putting together contingency plans for AGI to unleash itself in 2027, right? That's not going to affect Worcester very much because we're not the Bay Area, right? It's we actually have a higher percentage of people who are actually physically engaged in their work, not sitting we've been in Ed's Beds and Meds kind of community for a long time, not so much a sitting in front of a computer doing work kind of community.
Well, yeah, although I feel like Ed's is the education thing. I feel like the education thing getting disrupted by AI seems like a totally doable scenario. Right?
They might not even be here after the Trump administration is done with them, so we should probably just take Eds off the playing board for the time being.
As far as hospitals and housing.
Hospitals, housing, hotels, service industry, there's a lot of things here that could go untouched. And then there's this other component of bringing back, I get weirded out whenever people talk about bringing back American manufacturing. Because America is the second largest manufacturer in the world, right? We have been for decades. The difference is it's not like our grandfather's manufacturing where you're sitting at a milling tool and we weren't in the old tool and die factory, right? But manufacturing is mostly automated and it's been here. But if there are going to be forms of manufacturing that come back to the United States, the heads of the Blackstone are kind of a great place to put that, right? Because the infrastructure is already there. We're in a building right now that was former manufacturing.
Right,
the idea of that we have not just buildings and spaces that can be repurposed, but we actually already have the zoning to bring manufacturing back to the area. in a way that could be beneficial to the city and to the economy by offsetting whatever losses there may be from the robots coming to kill us all.
But by zoning, do you mean the like the many residential areas that are miszoned as manufacturing that are constantly asking city council to undo that, fix their zoning so they can. Or what do you mean by a zoning perspective?
Well, because we actually have industrial zoning,
Okay.
right? I mean, there isn't a lot. There are large cities that like you wouldn't really expect. They're not primed from a zoning perspective to be able to bring back any sort of manufacturing.
Okay.
We have pretty wide swaths of the city like that are still mostly untouched, right? I mean, up by the airport and whatnot, there's that entire business park, which like manufacturing, distribution, and whatnot, that a lot of those buildings are sitting empty right now. Parcels that have never been developed. There are some kind of interesting things that could be genuinely beneficial to the city on a long enough timeline should things start getting weird economically.
Yeah, I mean, so putting aside artificial intelligence stuff, I mean, I guess I just, I always think of Worcester as, I don't know, maybe like two different areas. There's like the downtown area, and then there's the like dense suburb area.
Sure.
And then there's other places that I don't go, that I know that are also in the city, but I don't know anything about them. Like when I look around downtown and I see all these not gigantic office buildings, but taller than a lot of city office buildings, and I think who's going to, and I look at the lack of foot traffic downtown as compared to say 2019,
Sure.
when the lunch crowd was reasonably big, right? Like I look at those buildings, and that's specifically where I look at it and I say these are buildings that were put here because there was a manufacturing industry here, and there were service businesses that handled the finance and the paperwork and
Sure.
whatever, and they all had needed a bunch of people to be in a room, passing pieces of paper around, and they were all having meetings, and they were all in these buildings, and these buildings are set up for this, and now this is not a thing, either because whatever, there's not the manufacturing, because people are doing their stuff in-house, because people are working from home, because people are writing a ChatGPT script to do all of their, half of their admin work. I mean, what becomes of like downtown Worcester? Because you could do anything, right? I mean, these buildings, it's like you could build like as I always dream, like you could build like a 50-foot gold statue of Gary Rosen inside any of these buildings if you wanted to tear down all the interior.
Yeah.
But we're not going to do that.
No.
I mean, we don't have that kind of vision, first of all.
No.
But
Have you seen the price of gold today? It hit like $3,500.
well, you know what, Brendan? In commodity news, Brent crude oil is $67 a barrel, down 3% on the week. No, up 3% on the week. Take two. But down 35% since our last show. And Bitcoin is $88,900, up 4% on the week, and up 103% since our last show. Today in Worcester, the air quality index is 38 due to small particles, which is on the high side of the good range.
All right.
I don't know why it would not be a little bit lower than it is. I don't know if there's forest fires going on in Vermont or what, but it could be a little better, but it's not bad.
So we're definitely not building a 50-foot tall Gary Rosen statue.
Yeah.
Gold Gary Rosen statue.
Any material.
Could probably do one out of butter. Aren't there places in Vermont that still do like butter?
I mean, if we were in Vermont, yeah, or we could have a cheese.
I'm getting off track.
Okay, go ahead.
I think what you've heard for the longest time when it came to those buildings downtown, old office buildings, specifically because we didn't have a lot of Class A office space, a lot of the older buildings were like B and C office space, was that it was too expensive to convert them to housing. And that was the common refrain at the start of COVID when those office buildings emptied out and the concern started floating that like, well, like you just said, what are we going to do with these? But if you've watched on the housing side of things, the price of housing has continued to go up, making the price of converting those buildings into apartments or condos not as expensive. We're actually in a pretty good position right now to start thinking about doing that because initial investors are more likely to be able to capture their return on their investment by converting to higher-end apartments and condominiums.
A bit surprised. Is it the old Unum building, the Chestnut Place, 1 Chestnut Place, 2 Chestnut Place? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think so.
I think it's the old Unum. See, this is.
Oh yes, I do know. Okay. Yeah, that's.
I've been very delighted to see that there's actually like a bunch of trucks and dudes around there the last few weeks, which is because it's the kind of thing where like turning this giant building into apartments to me makes total sense.
Yeah.
Because people want to live somewhere.
That's what's happening there.
Right. Yeah. And but it's also the kind of thing that the skeptical part of me thinks, well, it's never going to happen now. because everything is expensive, everything's impossible. The Worcester City Council is certainly on the side of people who want to make everything impossible, but it's possible for this apparently because they're working on it right now.
They are, and it's the person who is made that purchase. As far as I know, is still eager to buy more office buildings downtown to convert. It's just a matter of acquiring them and whatnot.
So whenever this subject of converting offices and converting factory space to housing comes up, people frequently talk about how, well, we could probably be doing more to make this easier from a regulatory point of view.
Oh, totally.
Does that make sense to you? Like, what kind of things in the city of Worcester specifically do you have a list in your head of these are the things?
Have you read Ezra Klein's Abundance yet? Because I mean, it is the book. I mean, that's like the whole point. And I know people either love that book or think that it should be the first one thrown into the fire for the modern book burnings. But yeah, no, that's exactly it. I get into this argument with folks all the time who I'm like completely aligned with, like politically or philosophically, that like when it comes to housing, right, like there's probably no better example of something that actually fits the supply side economics model than housing, right? Like if someone wants a house, they can't buy it unless it's available, and as soon as you start shrinking the supply, the price is obviously going to go up, right? Like there's almost no other factors involved other than how badly does somebody need housing. And we're not talking about edge cases of folks who are unhoused for mental health reasons or addiction reasons, just the people who want a house. And we are seeing in regions like ours, like more and more people who otherwise could be in housing and stable, losing housing, and then finding themselves unhoused as a reason. So like we're starting to like run out of arguments that we actually need to build more. It seems as though that there is the more common ideology in progressive circles is like the degrowth model, that like we need like less of everything and like that like whatever.
We need like giant international tariffs and a trade war to sort of shrink the economy. Those people have had their prayers answered,
but they
got nothing to complain about.
I think that the thing that we keep missing in places like Massachusetts, it's not Worcester, it's Massachusetts, it's New York, it's state, it's California, it's Pennsylvania. We make it so damn difficult to build anything. And there's good reasons why we do too, right? Like environmental concerns, safety concerns, labor concerns. Like we want to tick off a lot of boxes, but sometimes the process becomes the biggest part of building. And where you can see that again on the housing side, the New York Times did a great piece back in October, where they did a long-term research project on housing starts going back to the economic collapse in 2008. And they're basically able to show that we just haven't built anything. When you adjust for the live birth rate and the aging population of people who are now in the realm of potential homeowners, we just haven't built any houses since the market collapsed. We think that we do because you drive around Worcester and you look at all of these new apartment buildings going up everywhere and whatnot. It's like, well, we still average between 6,000 and 7,000 live births at Memorial Hospital every year. So unless we're doing that every year, we know that 25 years from now, we're going to have a problem, or a worse problem that we have now. It's like the one thing we didn't learn during COVID was exponential numbers.
I wonder how much of, I just thought about this just now. So a lot of new construction is this, what do you call it? Like pedestal and frame model or something? You know what I'm talking about?
Like the paneling stuff that you're talking about, the exterior?
I'm talking about the thing where somebody figured out that if you build the first floor of a building out of brick, then the top 4 or 5, then you can get away with now building multiple stories of wood above it in a way that the zoning code probably doesn't want you to do. But this is
there's a lot in there with fire code, which is again one of those weird things. We got to give hat tip to Mike Gaffney when we were building out the apartments downtown, on what used to be the mall. I mean, Mike Gaffney was one of the few people to point out, it's like, dude, this is stick construction. It's whatever year that was. It's like we're putting multiple stories of wood in downtown Worcester, Massachusetts, and then wrapping it in aluminum so it looks fancy. But
and the city council has complained about this, and I think everybody complains about this. That this looks, it looks kind of samey. It looks kind of odd. And I wonder how much of our perception that we're still building a reasonable amount of housing comes from the fact that maybe in 1990, when you built an apartment building, it looked like other stuff. Yeah. And now when you build an apartment building, it looks noticeable in a way that it wouldn't have been noticeable 25 years ago.
Totally.
And so you're like, we're building more noticeable housing.
I think there's something to be said too with the way materials and design elements come from other building booms, right? Like you can see this weird thing that happened in like the mid to late aughts with like high schools, where if you're in the interior, it doesn't look entirely dissimilar from like the last wave of shopping malls that were built. Well, because you had a lot of architects who were designing shopping malls and shopping centers, and they went out of business when everyone decided they didn't want shopping malls anymore. So they pivoted, and they didn't go out of business. They went out of the shopping mall business, and they pivoted to other forms of construction. So you start seeing those design elements come in. I feel like what you're seeing with apartment buildings is something that was borrowed from like more commercial sort of aspects of design and whatnot. They are complained about everywhere that, like you said, everything is the same. We do that anywhere. Like, I mean, that's like the things that Worcester folks would consider like not the same and unique. It tends to be entire neighborhoods full of vinyl and aluminum siding that are all within like one range of like taupe. So I think some of it is just like jarring because it's new. Like a lot of that went up in a very short period of time. I'm not a big fan, but I'm also not a big fan of brutalist architecture either, right? And I've managed to live with it.
Yeah. I mean, the variety. I have to say, like, I feel like variety is nice. Like a brutalist building in a forested area, or a brutalist building with the traditional building on either side of it can be very effective. Yeah. And 4 brutalist buildings in a row, or Government Center in Boston, is just a mess to me.
But you mentioned something about like permits or the process, regulatory demands on building. That is something that is like Worcester. Like, I mean, there's state law obviously, but there's obviously things that we can do or ask permission to do to be different, actually be different, instead of just pretend we're different. But I mean, it was only a couple months ago, the mayor was on the floor of the council talking about wanting to increase offsite modular housing construction, because apparently we have a manufacturer in Worcester or Worcester adjacent, who I'm not familiar with, but exists. That's a very difficult thing to do in this area for regulatory reasons, right? Like, but the technology to build an entire house offsite and then just have it delivered in pieces and put together like very quickly, that's not new technology. We just make it really hard to do from a regulatory perspective.
Right. This is one of these things that people in the that abundance community will point to all the time, right? That in 1970 whatever, we decided to just basically shut down manufactured housing, which is what you would call it. Like in the United States, we decided to just shut that down. That was a huge booming trend. The same way as like whatever personal airplanes were like actually a really booming thing for a while. Yeah. The flying car of the future, and then we just were like, you know what, you can't. We're just going to make this too much of a pain in the neck to do.
And I think, we need points of reference for that to make sense to people, and I think this is a really healthy one. 2022 is when George Jetson was born.
When he was born.
Born, okay. Right? Like, so I mean, like,
so
we're a little bit behind the curve. We're not way behind. We're still at the Flintstones, right? But it's, George Jetson should already be on the planet right now, and he could be on the planet, but we got some work to do if we're going to make George Jetson's adult life
right. I mean,
line up with the canon timeline.
If George Jetson's 3 years old, then yeah, we certainly could. In the next 10, 15 years, if we have a flying car, then we're good. He doesn't need a flying car as a kid.
No, he doesn't need a flying bassinet. Is that what they call them?
I don't know. I mean, your knowledge of Jetson's lore is presumably a lot better than mine.
You know, another weird one, Mike, that's something to think about before we run out of time. In the first season of the Golden Girls, Blanche, who was the one that was like, the sexy one, I think that was Blanche.
Rue McClanahan.
Yeah, so she was, in the first season, 2 years younger than J-Lo actually is today. You just mull it over in your head. The sexy one. People were different back then.
People were different back then.
All right, go ahead.
I mean, also that was a show where the title is literally, this show's about old ladies.
Yeah, I know, but the age is the important thing. The age of her character in that show.
Oh, no,
yeah, she's only 3 years older than I am right now in that show.
Really?
Yeah, she's younger than you. She was 52 in that show. That was her age.
Holy cow.
Yeah, J-Lo's only 55.
All right.
So 3 years, I guess, yeah. But
all right. See, relating to
now,
my age,
now it's sinking in now, right?
That's surprising to me. All right. So if we're going to summarize your take on the possible outlook for the city of Worcester, it's that like probably bad trends don't hit us as hard as they do a lot of the places. Possibly good trends, lift our boat as well as they're going to lift all other boats, and probably we're not super doomed.
Yeah, no, the one thing that you and I were doing this show, I think at the time, but when we had our last big economic crisis around 2008 or whatnot, I think one of the things that hit Worcester hard was the need to downsize City Hall, right? Like economically, the city got hit so hard that, staffing, you had a lot of early retirements, furloughs, and what have you. That it's so long ago, I feel like it's just a memory. There were substantial changes to the quality of services that came out of City Hall because we lost so many people so quickly. It's probably a comparison to make in what you're seeing with federal services now, right? Like, go call the Social Security Administration and tell me how that works out for you, right? Like, we took for granted a lot of really great services that came from City Hall, and they were disappeared out of need. That's actually the thing that does make me nervous more in the short term. Is it seems like this year we should be fine in the city of Worcester, but a lot could potentially change from both federal funding and then trickle down state funding over the next couple of years. And we haven't always proven ourselves to be the most resilient community from a financial budgeting, like long-term budgeting perspective. I would hope that there's something in the realm of potential that maybe earmuffs 90% of the people listening, that we could maybe start having a Prop 2.5 conversation in Worcester and come to understand the
What is that?
That's the tax levy system. So back in the 90s, we instituted Prop 2.5. It's like the cap that you can increase your tax levy year to year. We've never done it. So like we have this massive tax levy that has been completely, when people are constantly complaining about taxes, they're actually much lower than they could conceivably be had the city actually been raising its tax levy year to year.
And this is like
as allowed by state law.
I was gonna say, like, this is something that I think is important for people to either know, or for certainly people who are shooting their mouths up to reiterate, which is that we have only so much control over Worcester on a local level, and huge amounts of what we can do, at least governmentally locally, is based on some state law or state regulation.
Yeah, and that's what dictates the amount of increase that we can see year to year in our taxes. We just don't touch it, so we stay at this artificially low rate of taxation, which locals tend to view as being incredibly high. But it comes full circle to what we were just talking about on the housing side of things, right? Because our entire tax base is primarily coming from property taxes, either commercial or residential.
Right.
Because we don't allow ourselves, we artificially constrain the growth that we can see there through weird zoning measures and whatnot, and weird regulatory measures, even though our needs as a society have grown exponentially since the 90s when Prop 2.5 was put in. We still have roughly the same foundation to be pulling from a tax perspective. What you would end up hearing a lot of people arguing, probably rightly so in the short term, right, is that like my property taxes are going to go through the roof, I can't afford to be here anymore. But your property taxes are based on the valuation of your house. And the value of your house has only gotten so high because you can't build more housing, going back to the supply side conversation. If we just actually built shit the way we should be building stuff in Worcester on a long timeline, values would increase in a more normal way. They wouldn't just be doubling because of a virus either came from a pangolin or broke out of a lab. Who knows? I'm not one to judge. But we wouldn't be seeing these crazy explosions in values then hitting people really, really hard.
I mean, you're pointing out about people's housing values being high in part because of restricting construction. Like, this is one of these things that just frustrates me to no end, and maybe gives me a darker outlook than I'd otherwise have, which is that it feels like we have a pretty bipartisan consensus in this country that we should have a housing crisis. Like, if you talk to people and you say, would you like to see more housing built in your city if it reduced the cost of housing in your city, I think pretty consistently people will say sure. Like, people are not as self-interested as you might think based on these surveys, at least. But the reality is, is that, like, everybody wants their house value to stay high and go higher.
Yeah.
And the connection between, like, when you get down into, like, okay, sure, build housing in my city, not next door to me,
right,
not in my backyard, as one might coin a phrase. That's the kind of thing that I worry that this is just like what they call like a wicked problem, where it's just like the complexity of the problem once you bring in like the real world politics of it becomes impossible. Like, the reality is, if we wanted to, double economic growth in Worcester and make it so that 25 years from now, everybody in Worcester was a millionaire, paying taxes like a millionaire, and getting services and a lifestyle of a millionaire, probably we could do this, but nobody wants to do this for a million reasons.
Well, and I don't know how much of this fits into the 5 minutes.
I keep
we've
looking
got
at my
left.
watch
I know.
because we're doing a weird taping system this week where I don't see the number.
We need a shot
We have
clock.
like 5 minutes left.
The thing that
I'll
I
put my watch down
think
here so you can
is,
look at
it's been lost to time is to what you just said. The whole concept of housing as being an investment was just one leg of the proverbial 3-legged stool, right? Like you had your house, you had your pension or retirement plan, and you had Social Security. And those 3 things worked in concert with one another to ensure that the average American, when they became old enough that they decided they didn't need to work anymore, they had this asset pool that they could pull from in various ways to make sure that they weren't destitute. It was actually kind of a cool system. Then on the Social Security side, we decided that we're going to cap things at $9,000 a year for your annual contribution, whether you're making $1 billion a year or you're making $100,000 a year. So that leg of the stool got really, really short. The pensions are gone, and the investment opportunities are up and down all over the place. So that leg has gotten really short. The one thing that Americans tend to have left, if they were lucky enough to, through the accident of birth, be alive at a time when they could conceivably buy a house, is housing. And now the average person has gotten a taste of what it feels like to have housing values go through the roof. And that 3-legged stool has now become a really weird pogo stick, right? It's like people are just bouncing precariously on. And yeah, same thing. Like if someone just came in, I love the idea. Like I have no problem saying out loud, single family zoning from my perspective is nonsense, and we should just make it go away and let people build how they want to. The likelihood of someone building a skyscraper next to my house, very, very small. Just like we see in Houston, where they effectively have no zoning, people still do what makes sense from a building perspective. That said, yeah, I'd get weirded out right now if somebody was going to build a massive amount of housing in my neighborhood, because there's a ton of equity tied up in the house that I've been in 20 years. Also, it might just sell really quick as soon as I caught wind, and that could be good for people as well too, because it's one more parcel that could get bought up and become more dense housing. Mm-hmm. We just need to have better and more realistic conversations about, like, people shouldn't be ashamed to say, the real reason I don't want more housing is because I don't want people to feel like someone's stealing from me. Like, we made it okay for people to say that, we could probably figure out a way to work around it. The same way that, like, if you hear somebody say, I don't want my taxes to go up, people should be more comfortable adding into the conversation, because I'm on a fixed income and this would crush me. Because we've been saying for like 20 years, are we really that dense that we can't figure out a way to protect old people on a fixed income from increasing property taxes? Like, really? We've got it to 2020. George Jetson is already alive, and we still haven't figured out a way to protect old people when it comes to their fixed incomes. What are we doing here?
I don't know, I was going to say something brilliant, and I don't know anything brilliant, but that's okay.
I think you're brilliant, Mike.
Thanks, Brendan. I had something not quite good to say, and I still remember what that was, but I don't have anything good to say. That's all right. I have this paper and this pencil. I should write these notes down. Well, hey, this has been a good show. I appreciate you taking the contrarian perspective that Worcester is not doomed. Like I always think about that old Bruce Russell quote of "This city should be destroyed," and then when I see the city being destroyed, I'm like, it doesn't seem as badass to see it actually happen.
I got a hypothetical for you I wanted to throw at you, now that our friend Gary Rosen could conceivably be back on the city council. What's the proportional style of voting that I always forget the name of? They do it ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice.
How would you feel about a ranked choice voting system where Gary Rosen is the only option?
I mean, honestly, I don't think that it would be systemically a good thing. Yeah. I think it's important for us to have other choices than Gary Rosen. I think it's also obviously important that we all vote for Gary Rosen, because I gotta talk to him about like the only person I've ever seen enjoy being on the Worcester City Council. And whenever people talk about like we gotta increase the salaries or whatever, we gotta get a higher whatever, a broader spectrum of even more talented people on the city council somehow. Who have something to bring other than like a huge pain tolerance. I feel like he's like the key, man. Yeah, he's like, how do you enjoy this terrible job?
And in parallel to enjoying the terrible job, he takes the old idea of like getting more conservative as you get older and just literally douses it with kerosene and torches it. This guy's at the State House advocating for clean, safe injection sites, free bus fare. I mean, when we started doing this, did you ever think that we would be looking at Gary Rosen, the progressive candidate for Worcester?
there's been things, especially on quarry reform,
Quarry
that he had a very progressive take back in the day. I mean, I'll point this out too. Gary Rosen knows this. Like, I'm not going to say that I endorse Gary Rosen politics always or even a lot of the time. But like, if you're not going to, I mean, and I guess I can respect you if you don't endorse Gary Rosen as just like a charming son of a bitch. But like, I mean, I don't see how you pull that off. I don't see how you meet Gary Rosen and you still hate Gary Rosen. But yeah. Other people do hate him, so I'm not going to say
Something for everybody.
I'm not going to say it's inhuman. I'm just going to say, guys, thanks for watching 508. We welcome your questions and comments at the email address pieandcoffee@gmail.com. Till next week, remember, Worcester, you can bench more than you think you can. I forgot about that slogan. I was like, that's not a great slogan. We'll go with another slogan for the next show too.